The Galactic Arena was not a stadium, it was a monument. Suspended in the void of a dying red giant's orbit, the ring stretched for kilometers, its walls etched with glyphs older than recorded history. Light from the swollen star bled across its surface, painting it in hues of crimson and gold. Every world in the Union tuned in to watch. Entire populations held their breath, eager for blood and spectacle. For most, it was entertainment. For Earth, it was survival. Inside the council's chambers overlooking the arena, species of every shape and form gathered in tiers of floating platforms. Delegates clicked, hissed, or pulsed their disdain as the announcement came: Earth, the fledgling species, had been summoned to prove its worth. One champion. One fight after another. Defeat meant exile, trade cut, colonies strangled, humanity left to wither in isolation. And so the humans sent a soldier. Daniel Kane stepped through the arched gate and into the light. The crowd roared, though not in support. Their voices rang with laughter, mockery, and eager malice. A billion eyes studied the scarred man standing alone on the sand. His boots crunched softly on the metallic floor. He wore no gleaming armor, only a reinforced combat suit patched with scars from past wars. The scars on his face told stories older than the stars above, one slicing across his temple, another faded burn across his jaw. His eyes, though, were steady, cold steel beneath the chaos of jeers. From the human section of the gallery, a handful of diplomats sat in silence. They looked painfully small compared to the alien entourages spread in lavish displays of color and banners. The ambassadors' knuckles whitened on the rail. They all knew this was less a duel than a public execution staged for amusement. Daniel muttered under his breath, unheard by all but himself. One fight at a time. One step forward. The announcer's booming voice, synthesized in dozens of languages, cut through the chamber. From the colonies of Earth, Daniel Kane, called Ironheart, former soldier of ground wars, mortal flesh to meet the arena. A gate across from him rumbled open. The floor shook under pounding steps. Out emerged a nightmare of chitin and serrated limbs, Zyrak of the Vorchath's swarm. 6 legs moved in eerie harmony, each ending with a scythe-like claw. Its mandibles clicked in hunger as it tasted the air, its carapace gleaming under the harsh floodlights. The crowd erupted in approval. The Vorchath were infamous predators. Zyrak had ended dozens in this same sand. Kane sized it up with a soldier's calm. No wasted motion, no bravado. Just study and breathe. The insectoid was taller, faster, armored like a tank. But every creature had habits, weaknesses. He only needed to live long enough to find them. Zyrak shrieked, and the duel began. It moved like lightning, a blur of limbs. Kane rolled aside as a claw tore through the ground where he had stood, sparks spraying. Another limb lashed. He parried with his combat blade, the steel screeching across chitin. The force rattled his bones. Too fast, Kane muttered, circling. Predictable patterns, maybe. The insect pressed the attack, a storm of strikes meant to overwhelm. Kane absorbed the rhythm, each dodge and block costing him breath but feeding him knowledge. Zyrak always favored the right foreclaw for finishing strikes, overcommitting after a feint. Another slash carved sparks across his chest plate. Kane staggered, forcing himself upright. The insect hissed in triumph and lunged. Kane sidestepped, barely a breath faster, driving his blade against the joint of its leg. The steel bit shallow but drew ichor. Zyrak screeched in rage. The crowd howled. Some mocked the feeble cut, others gasped. Humans weren't supposed to touch a Vorchath at all. Zyrak redoubled its frenzy, claws hammering like falling blades. Kane ducked and weaved, retreating toward a cracked support pillar jutting from the floor. He baited the insect with feigned weakness, limping just enough to tempt arrogance. The predator lunged, scythe raised high. Kane pivoted. Zyrak's claws slammed into the pillar with earth-shattering force. The structure crumbled, trapping its limb in the wreckage. For a heartbeat it struggled, legs thrashing to pull free. Kane didn't waste it. He surged forward, plunging his blade through the exposed joint at the neck. The steel rammed deep, piercing the softer tissue beneath armor. He twisted, ripped free, and stepped aside as Zyrak collapsed in a shrieking heap. The arena fell into shocked silence. Then chaos erupted. Half the crowd roared in outrage, demanding disqualification, spitting curses in alien tongues. The other half murmured uneasily, recognition dawning that the fragile species had just killed a legend. Up in the council gallery, one delegate hissed, "Impossible! The human cheated." Another, a crystalline being shimmering with light, whispered, "No, he adapted." Kane stood over the corpse, chest heaving, blood and ichor mixing on his blade. He didn't raise his arms or bask in the moment. He only scanned the faces in the gallery until his gaze found Earth's small delegation. For a fleeting instant, their terror gave way to hope. The announcer's voice cracked with disbelief. "Victor! Daniel Kane of Earth!" Kane left the body cooling in the dust and walked back toward the gate. The jeers, the cheers, the thunder of the crowd washed over him like static. None of it mattered. Survival mattered. Inside the preparation chamber, he slumped onto a bench, peeling off his gloves to reveal bruised knuckles. He poured antiseptic over the shallow cut on his arm, wincing only slightly. Alone in the quiet, the adrenaline began to ebb. His hands shook, not with fear but with memory, the kind that never left. He stared at the floor, his voice low, steady, speaking to no one. One down. Too many left. Outside, the crowd still thundered. But for the first time, the whispers carried doubt. For the first time, they wondered, what if humans were not prey? The arena never slept. Between bouts, its colossal walls pulsed with alien light, and its tiers of spectators shifted in restless waves. Rumors coursed through the council platforms like wildfire. The human had survived. Worse, he had won. Some species called it luck. Others insisted the insectoid had underestimated him. But a few, the more cautious delegates, leaned forward with genuine unease. One victory was an anomaly. A second would be a warning. On the council dais, High Champion Vedrak reclined like a king surveying prey. His scaled arms folded, talons gleaming under the red star's glow. When Earth's delegation dared a glance in his direction, he bared a slow, cruel smile. "Your champion won't last the day," he growled, voice carrying even without amplification. "The arena devours pretenders." Daniel Kane stood behind the gates, listening to the hum of the machinery as it prepared to open again. His ribs ached, his arms stiff from the shallow cut he'd bandaged himself. The medics had offered stronger treatments, but he had refused. Pain kept him sharp. He breathed slow, eyes closed. One fight at a time. The announcer's voice thundered. "Second trial! Cathor of the Grell Dominion, breaker of chains, the Leviathan of the depths!" The floor shuddered. From the far gate lumbered a figure that dwarfed the insectoid before him. Cathor's amphibian bulk gleamed wet under the light, each step slamming like a drumbeat. In its webbed hands it carried twin plasma chains, already hissing with lethal energy. Sparks fell like raindrops as it swung them lazily, the arcs leaving scars across the floor. The crowd's roar was deafening. They loved Cathor. He was spectacle incarnate. Daniel muttered under his breath. "Showman. Big weapons. Overconfidence." He flexed his grip on the blade. This fight would be different, slower, heavier, with no room for mistakes. Cathor struck first. A chain snapped forward, cutting the air with a hiss. Daniel threw himself flat as it scorched past, melting sand into glass. Another swing followed, grazing his shoulder with searing heat. He rolled, chest pounding, each strike close enough to kill. The alien bellowed in its gurgling tongue, laughter rippling through its bloated throat. "Fragile bones! Dance for me, little prey!" Daniel stayed silent, forcing Cathor to keep talking, to keep taunting. The longer it gloated, the more it revealed. Its swings grew wider, showier, meant to entertain rather than kill efficiently. He circled, keeping his steps deliberate, measuring distance. Each crack of plasma was a rhythm he could read. Chains had reach, but once tangled. The opening came when Cathor swung both whips in a wide arc. Daniel darted in close, sliding low beneath the glowing lines. One chain struck the arena wall, the other looped around a support column. The Titan roared, tugging, but the chain locked tight. Daniel surged up, slamming his blade into the alien's thick thigh. The cut was shallow, but it staggered Cathor enough to topple him sideways. The chain snapped taut, wrenching its own arm backward. Before Cathor could recover, Daniel drove forward, planting his knee against its chest and jamming the blade through the joint of its shoulder. Plasma fizzled out as the weapon clattered from its grip. The arena shook with gasps and cries. A Titan brought down by speed and precision. Daniel ripped his blade free, stepping back as the amphibian crashed to the floor, its bulk shuddering in defeat. He kept his weapon ready until the announcer declared, "Victor, Daniel Kane of Earth!" The roar that followed was mixed now. Half jeers, half awe. The human was no longer a joke. He was a problem. Daniel walked off without celebration, his breath ragged, his body screaming for rest. Inside the preparation chamber, he sat heavily on the bench. His knuckles were raw, ribs screaming with every breath. The door hissed, and Earth's ambassador slipped inside. The woman's face was pale, eyes burning with both fear and pride. "If you fall, Earth falls," she said quietly. Daniel looked at her, weary but unflinching. "Then I won't fall." No more words were needed. She left, and the gate opened again. The announcer's voice thundered. "Third trial! Lyervath of the Shrine, Master of the Mind, Weaver of Dreams." Daniel stepped back onto the sand. His body felt heavier than before, fatigue dragging at every motion. He clenched his jaw. The worst wasn't always the strongest opponent. Sometimes it was the strangest. Lyervath glided into view, an avian figure with translucent wings shimmering like liquid crystal. Its eyes glowed a soft violet, and its voice whispered not in sound, but in thought, "You are already broken, human. Why pretend?" Daniel froze as images slammed into his mind, visions of Earth burning, oceans boiling, cities reduced to rubble. He smelled smoke, heard the screams of children, felt the heat of fire on his skin. He staggered, clutching his head. "No, no, this isn't real." The crowd leaned forward, savoring the human's torment. Many had fallen this way, undone without a single blow. Lyervath's voice coiled tighter. "You fight alone, Daniel Kane. You carry a world that will never remember you. Lay down, and it will end." Daniel dropped to one knee, sweat pouring down his face. The visions sharpened, tearing at him. His instincts screamed to surrender, to make it stop. But another voice cut through the fog, his own, buried deep, one step forward. One fight at a time. He forced his breath steady, shutting out the false fire and screams. He focused on the real, the weight of his blade in his hand, the grit of sand under his knees, the pounding of his own heart. "Nice trick," he muttered, forcing himself upright. His voice cut across the illusion. "But humans don't fold just because it hurts," Lyervath faltered. For the first time, surprise flickered in its glowing eyes. Daniel lunged. The avian shrieked in his mind, hurling fresh waves of terror, but he pushed through, each step like walking through fire. He closed the distance, swinging his blade with brutal efficiency. The steel cut across fragile wing. Lyervath screeched, staggering back. Daniel followed, unrelenting, until the avian collapsed, bleeding, its mental grip broken. The arena erupted, this time not just with outrage, but with disbelief. Few had ever resisted Lyervath's illusions. The human had not only resisted, he had triumphed. Daniel stood over the fallen psychic, chest heaving, vision blurred with exhaustion. The announcer's voice rang again, uncertain, as if unable to believe its own words. "Victor, Daniel Kane of Earth." In the stands, High Champion Vadrak's laughter rumbled, low and mocking. "3 fights, and he still crawls forward. Let him come. I'll break him myself." Daniel staggered back through the gates, nearly collapsing. He leaned against the wall, bloodied but still breathing. His whisper was barely audible. "The beast is waiting. So let him wait." The arena had never been louder. Every seat was filled, every screen across the galaxy tuned to the final duel. Billions leaned forward to watch one man face a monster. 3 victories had unsettled the council, but none expected the human to outlast the High Champion. Daniel Kane stood behind the last gate, sweat drying on bruised skin, lungs burning with every breath. His body was battered, his blade chipped from use. But his mind remained unbroken. He pressed his forehead against the cold wall and whispered, "One more. Just one more." The gate's locks disengaged with a grinding roar. The announcer's voice carried through the chamber, heavy with reverence. "Final trial! High Champion Vedrak of the Kroll Dominion, undefeated master of the arena." The opposite gate exploded open, and the beast stepped through. Vedrak towered nearly twice Daniel's height, reptilian scales gleaming black under the red star. Each step was a thunderclap, claws raking the sand. War axes rested in his hands, their edges etched with kill marks from centuries of duels. His gaze fixed on Daniel with predatory delight. The crowd fell into a hush. Even in their bloodlust, they respected this moment. Daniel raised his blade, steady despite the tremor in his arm. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "You've been waiting." Vedrak's grin revealed rows of serrated teeth. "I enjoy savoring the weak before they break. Humanity will be erased with you." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Funny. That's what they always say. Yet here I am." The Titan laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "You'll leave this sand in pieces." The gong sounded. Vedrak moved faster than his size suggested. One axe swept wide, a blur of steel. Daniel ducked, the wind of the strike brushing past his hair. The second axe followed immediately, forcing him to roll. The ground shook as the weapon embedded deep into the floor. Sparks flared when Vedrak ripped it free. Daniel kept moving, refusing to meet strength with strength. He darted around the beast, forcing Vedrak to turn, to chase, to burn his energy. Each swing shook the air, each near miss carving deeper gouges into the arena floor. "Run, little prey!" Vedrak roared. "I'll make it last." Daniel's breath came ragged, his ribs screaming. He knew he couldn't run forever. He needed a crack in the beast's rhythm. A feint came first. Daniel pretended to stumble, letting fatigue show. Vedrak lunged with both axes raised high, confident in the kill. At the last instant, Daniel slid sideways, his blade snapping across the champion's thigh. Blood sprayed, black and steaming. The crowd gasped. Vedrak's eyes flared with rage. "You dare!" His swing backhanded Daniel across the chest, sending him flying. The impact rattled his bones. He coughed blood, staggered upright, vision swimming. "Still standing," he rasped, wiping his mouth. The Kroll snarled, advancing with renewed fury. Axes hammered down again and again. Daniel blocked one strike, the force numbing his arms, then barely avoided the next by hurling himself flat. His body screamed with every motion. But in the beast's arrogance, Daniel saw what he needed. Vedrak's fury made him sloppy. Each strike grew wider, heavier, less guarded. Between blows, Daniel spoke, his voice hoarse but sharp. "That's the problem with monsters like you. You think fear wins fights. But fear only fuels us." Vedrak bellowed and raised both axes for a killing strike. Daniel lunged in close, too close for the axes to swing freely. He drove his blade against the Kroll's side, aiming for the gap between scales. The steel bit shallow, but the champion roared in pain, jerking back. One axe dropped from his grip, clattering across the sand. The crowd erupted, torn between horror and awe. For the first time in decades, Vedrak had been disarmed. Breathing hard, Daniel raised his blade again, though his hands shook from the effort. His voice was iron. "You bleed like the rest of us." Vedrak's tail lashed, slamming Daniel across the chest. He hit the ground hard, air leaving his lungs in a burst. The beast stomped forward, seizing his throat with one massive claw and lifting him from the sand. "You are nothing," Vedrak snarled, squeezing. "You will die as a warning to your kind." Daniel's vision darkened. The grip was crushing, breath choking away. But his hand, trembling, still clutched the hilt of his blade. He forced his arm upward, jamming the weapon into the exposed flesh of the champion's neck. The blade sank deep. Vedrak staggered, choking in disbelief. He released Daniel, who crashed to the ground, gasping for air. The Titan clawed at the steel lodged in his throat, blood pouring down his chest. Daniel forced himself up, swaying on unsteady legs. He seized the axe Vedrak had dropped earlier. With both hands he raised it high. Every muscle screamed, but his will burned hotter than the pain. The crowd held its breath. "Earth doesn't break," Daniel growled, voice raw. Then he brought the axe down. The blade cleaved through scale and bone. Vedrak collapsed to his knees, then fell forward, the ground shaking beneath his bulk. Silence gripped the arena. Billions across the galaxy stared in disbelief. The undefeated champion lay dead at the feet of a human. Daniel stood trembling, drenched in blood, barely able to hold the axe. He staggered, then planted it into the sand for balance. With his free hand, he pulled a small cloth patch from his belt, a tattered Earth flag. He raised it above his head. The silence shattered into chaos. Some screamed denial, others roared in awe, and many simply sat in stunned silence. From the council's dais, voices rose in fury. "Impossible! Fraud!" Yet others, grudging or admiring, admitted the truth: the human had done what no one else could. Earth's delegation stood, tears in their eyes, the ambassador pressing her hands together as though in prayer. For the first time, hope replaced fear. Daniel's body finally gave out. He collapsed to his knees, still clutching the flag. His voice was a whisper carried on the arena's silence. "One man walked in alone. But I carried all of you." The announcer, shaken, declared with finality. "Victor! Daniel Kane of Earth!" The roar that followed was unlike anything the arena had ever known. Humanity had arrived.